Hi guys, welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. Today we're trying something different. I asked you guys, what are your most unpopular opinions and your hot takes in Supermassive Games history so far? And a lot of you commented in. We got 35 comments, so we're just going to blitz right through it. Jack, I'll let you kick off, mate. Where do you want to start?
Yep, so we're going to start with Zach, the Cardinals fan, who says, Medan is underrated. It has good scares. The abandoned ship is a cool, unique environment, multiple branching paths to take compared to the other games. I mean, mate, this couldn't be more timely because we've not long finished the analysis for this series, but what do you think?
Yeah, I love it. Like, Man and Medan, I appreciate it even more, as time's gone on. I think it might be my favorite game in terms of horror as well, actually. I love everything about it, from, the abandoned ship. And yeah, in terms of branching, potentially the best. Maybe, that break between Until Dawn and DPA. They spent, on Man of Medan, because, yeah, the branching just is so much more sophisticated than the other games, lad. How about you?
Absolutely. I mean, I know when we did our ranking a while ago, it was at the bottom. And for me, it's probably, obviously we've still got to do Little Hope yet, but it has gone into third now. And I feel like for me, it is because of literally the reasons that Zach has put. It's got the scare factor. I think the setting for me is basically what wins Medan. The characters, not so much. And then the branching as well, it's superb. And we've literally just recorded a video where we've seen the added scenes as well, and they were pretty good as well. I love that, the way the characters move around in that situation. So certainly underrated, and I'm glad that it's getting this little revival. That's sort of as people look back on season 1.
Also to note, guys, we're not gonna cover all the comments, and some of you guys said pretty much the same thing. So, for example, here we've got a comment by Venomaze as well as Anteater, who basically all say that they think plot armor's a good thing. For instance, with Venomaze, it makes the stories that have them stronger than those who really don't. So, for example, he points out House of Ashes, how Jason and Salim, who have a lot of plot armor, are actually the best ones in the game because they have more time to be fleshed out. And I get what you're saying, Eric and Rachel can get dumped out the game pretty early, and Eric can pretty much become a background character. So yeah, Jack, what do you take of that plot armor, good or bad thing?
It's an awkward one, isn't it? Again, we've done a video on this, but it's really one of them things where in certain instances it can be downright annoying. In other instances it's kind of necessary. I look at maybe one of the annoying ones you could say is maybe Mark from The Devil in Me, how he literally gets all the way to the lighthouse. Other instances the killer comes into contact with someone and they're dead. With Mark, he puts him to one side as the trap. You could argue that is part of the whole ferryman thing. He's sort of using him to bring the next lot of people on board. I get it. But, from a blind playthrough perspective, you're sort of trying to immerse yourself that all, there are consequences to your actions. Players can die. So, yeah, it's a bit of annoying. But at the same time, can you have a game where all of your choices lead to something? And if all the bad choices meant death, then wow, we'd be waiting a long time for these games, and do you know what I mean? It might not actually be as satisfying as an experience as we'd hope it to be. But what about you, mate?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if we take, like you said, The Devil in Me, I think us diehard fans, mate, now that we know the formula of these games, it's very much becoming to the point where I look at a cast of 5 and I'm looking at, okay, who here has the plot armor? And I worked out pretty swiftly when I fucked up my QTEs with Mark and he didn't die. I'm like, well, it's got to be him, surely. So yeah, I think, the formula, we've sussed it. And it does kind of lend where we almost slate plot armor. But I do get what these guys are saying. You somewhat need it to keep the game going. And yeah, usually a member of the cast is integral to the storyline. And you have to keep him alive. So yeah, it's an interesting one because I almost think that we would be asking for too much if we just completely, stripped plot armor from all the characters, to be honest.
It's true, and I'm not going to say that what I'm about to say is exclusive to all the games, but it is a pattern that I've noticed that when you first start playing a Supermassive game, it tends to be the characters that you start playing off as the most. They tend to be the ones that die earliest. I'm thinking about Eric in House of Ashes. I'm thinking about Charlie in The Devil in Me. I could go on even with like the Quarry, you know, Jacob and Abby, they can die quite early and you play as them at the beginning, which does make sense because you're trying to give them characters airtime before they die, but also it does make it somewhat predictable as to what characters will sort of just get through the plot unscathed towards the end. So yeah, it's going to be one of them things that it's just a balancing act. You can't really get it perfect. You know, it's just what sort of place on the spectrum you sit.
Tell you what, mate, to interject as well, I recently told you about a horror game I discovered called Song of Horror, and that's interesting because I think you have 4 characters. One of them's the main one, but the other 3 can die in any of the levels, and then you just move on from that story. And then you have the main guy, I think his name's Daniel, and if Daniel dies, you have to restart the game. And it's a really challenging game, and like whether you would get frustrated by that, which can happen because you only get limited lives, or you think that's a cool feature, maybe that's something, you know, for Supermassive Games. Because like I say, we've sussed the formula, and I wouldn't mind if they tinkered with it a little bit. I think it could be quite healthy for them as well.
Okay, so we've got a comment here from Jonathan Jimbo, King of Drake, Stacey's mum, and sorry, there we go, got it. And yeah, they all said that they actually think that Little Hope is underrated. That, or it's their personal favourite of the 4. Hey, I'm going to throw it straight over to you. What do you think on this?
I mean, I don't hate Little Hope, but I think it's the weakest out of the 4. And I know a lot of people, you know, some of these guys say it's their favourite, and they actually rank Devil in Me harshly, which we'll talk about later. But I don't know, like, I think it's just the linearity for me. It's the fact that Will Poulter, I didn't get much out of the Andrew character. It's not that I hate the twist. I think that the double fake out endings didn't do it itself any favours, but I just think a lot of it is just walking down dark streets, going in and out of buildings, not achieving that much till you get to like the end twist, which is probably the best bit, right? As well as the flashbacks. So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it missed the mark massively, and I feel like after the branching that Man and Medan had, I was a little underwhelmed. However, by no means do I hate Little Hope. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, you know how I was talking about the setting of Medan was so strong. I feel like the setting of Little Hope is perhaps the weakest of the series, and you are right that it's just, you know, a lot of walking down roads and going in and out of derelict buildings. I mean, I feel like the big thing that people have with Little Hope is the twist. Now, we've said this before, haven't we, that it's hurt because of the fact it came after Medan, where it was kind of a fake-out ending because everyone was hallucinating. I feel like it's really down to almost like how you view Little Hope, because if you was to play this game once, then I don't know, like I don't know, it depends, because like you could look on it and be like, oh, it's like, you know, stories you write as a kid where it goes, oh, it was all a dream and it's just a big cop out. There are details in there that I think are very well executed when the twist does come round, and I will say that the twist of Little Hope is stronger than Medan. I will stick with that. But I feel like overall, if you're looking at the Man and Medan Little Hope debate, is that for me, Little Hope has the stronger story, but Man and Medan is the better game. I don't know if like you sort of get where I'm coming from there, mate, but like, yeah, it's just that Little Hope, maybe the story works, but just the gameplay elements and the replayability, that's what makes it lacking.
Yeah, like I think I'd rather a really big twist than a game hold your hand as to what the big twist is, which Man and Medan strongly does. So, no, I completely agree with you on that front. And like, you know, we have discussed, Little Hope is the one analysis we're yet to cover, and I really want to dive back into it because, you know, I'm an open-minded person and I'm ready for my opinion to get swayed. So yeah, until we look back at Little Hope, yeah, I'll keep your comments in mind, guys. Thank you very much for voicing them. We have Twepper, or Tweeper, the 8,917th of them. He has gone and said, I would love even shorter DPA games. So I love playing Couch Co-op with friends, so a game that lasts 3 to 4 hours is golden in my opinion. That is interesting because the games can run, you know, 8 hours, some of them, especially like the later ones like Devil in Me. They are quite long games, and Jack, I think you were saying as well, aren't you, like a fan of like whether if the games became a bit shorter? Am I right in thinking that?
I was saying that like maybe not. It doesn't have to be as excessive as The Devil in Me. Like I'd be, not that I'd be complaining if it was like The Devil in Me, because I think that's great. But if they were to shorten them to say like a 5-6 hours, like House of Ashes, and do you know what I mean? I'd take that as standard. I'd be happy with that. To see it go to even shorter, it would be very interesting, because I mean we've covered other games like Erica where it's like a 2-hour film and that's got a certain amount of branching to it. But I feel like with that length, maybe you'd have to. I suppose it could work because you'd have to throw people into the action a lot sooner. You'd actually have less time to be able to build up certain elements. But then on the flip side, that could suffer in terms of character depth and stuff like that. So I'm a little bit on the fence with this one. What about you?
Yeah, I guess so as well. Like, we're playing The Expanse currently, and I get that's an episodic game. But there is I know people say, oh, the episodes are too short. But from this is completely selfish, guys, but from a content creator point of view, it's quite nice for myself to have a short episode, so then I can get into like the recording with Jack and then the editing. So if I'm being completely selfish and from my perspective, a shorter game will always work best for me, lad.
Oh, fair enough, mate. Okay, so next we have comments from Dimitar and Scrungeful, who basically say that they're not sure if it's an unpopular opinion, but they like Rachel from House of Ashes. I mean, just to react to this one, what I would say about Rachel is that I don't think she's a very nice person. As others have mentioned in this as well, I do think that she is a good character, albeit she's flawed because of the cheating and X, Y, and Z. But I think, she's in a position, she has that moment with Clarice where she's, had to learn to be queen bitch, as she puts. And you just feel that she's obviously had some difficult times behind her, and this is this is the person that she's become as a result from it. Do I think that she's absolutely memorable, like, maybe Charlie Lonnet or, some other characters in the series? Perhaps, maybe not. But in terms of maybe the celebrity guests, you're talking about your Shaun Ashmore, Will Poulter, Ashley Tisdale, and Jessie Buckley. Yeah, I would say that actually that Ashley Tisdale's Rachel is the strongest if you're looking at it from a writing character point of view. So I can see why people sort of back her, but I do think that she's not a nice person.
Yeah, I think typically if you're a big fan of the channel and you watch all our content, you'll know that I come down quite harshly on Rachel. And I will admit that it's because I look at the cheating and I usually don't go beyond that. I'm not even interested to look at any other traits because I'm like, well, she cheated. She's a bad person. Full stop, done. But I get where you're coming from, and Scrunchful goes into really good detail about how it's reasonable that her guard is up because of all the sexism around being in a military camp and stuff. So yeah, I mean, for sure, maybe you could give a bit of credit where it's due. Rachel, yeah, there's certainly good elements to her character. I quite like the little dialogue scenes between her and Eric. But I don't know, I'd also argue that this isn't Rachel's flaw. I think this is the flaw for any DPA character, that being like a 6 to 9 hour game, you're not gonna really have the character flesh out the way the Quarry and Until Dawn characters are going to be. My all-time favourite DPA character is Charlie Lonnet, and I mean, I'd say he's like maybe an A or a B character, but none of these characters have come close to him in my opinion. And I feel like as long as this DPA formula goes on, these characters are usually going to end up being C standard categories for me, max, on average really. So yeah, I mean, that's probably why I come down harshly on Rachel, to be honest, lad. Okay, next we have Javon, or Javen Scruggs, sorry about that. You say that you find it tough to revisit the game after beating it once or twice. Now, I agree. Most of these games I've picked up once and I've put it back down and I've never touched again. I mean, mainly because, I'm just a really busy person, I've got a 40-hour job and then, I do the editing and stuff, so I rarely actually have time to pick these games up again. But I do agree, like, there's not much tempting me to pick up the DPA games, for example, or Until Dawn the Quarry. Because, yeah, like you say, I know what happens, I know where the plot armor is. It's much easier for me to just go on YouTube and look at the branching afterwards and then think, oh, that's clever. And I know that might be a cop-out answer, but for sure. And like I said, that Supermassive Games might need to mix its formula up a bit. I wonder if there is a way to get around that. Like, maybe there could be an AI system where the characters maybe switch roles. I know that's so easier said than done because you've written characters to do certain things, so it's also a really dumb idea at the same time. But now I'm kind of with you on Jathan, and I think it's one that Jack would probably be able to contest more, being the trophy hunter that he is, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with me, I completely understand where they're coming from, though. It's just that I'm a bit of a self-confessed madman when it comes to these games because, you know, as it's obvious, I'm passionate about these games, and, you know, games that I'm passionate about, I do want to get 100%, especially if I can sense that it's doable as well. But it's also a challenge, you know, and it does take a lot of hours and a lot of sort of time and dedication to do them, and sometimes I have to like work it out so that I'm doing a certain playthrough and I'm going to make sure to pick up multiple at one time. But yeah, like I do see what people mean. I mean, maybe it comes back to what Twepper's point before was about making the games a lot shorter. Maybe that would encourage people to revisit it more because then you know that you're not going to have to sit around for multiple sittings just to do one playthrough. So yeah, I completely get it. Okay, so next we've got Tatjana's comment, who says, I mean, we've actually got quite a few comments. We're just going to pick the one out for interest of time. But they've said, Ryan is a good character, while Caitlin didn't stand out that much to me. Ryan, for me, is a bit of a wet blanket. Like, trying to think, like, because you've said good character, I'm not necessarily assuming you're going to say that he's particularly likeable, but maybe you're saying he's well written. For me, I don't know why he's one of the ones at the end game. Maybe they're really trying to, you know, push this arc that he was a shy kid that didn't really communicate, but he'd become this heroic figure at the end. I didn't necessarily buy into it all that much, nor did I buy into that the potential shipping with him and Laura. I thought he was a bit of a dick to Dylan as well, like I've said in previous videos. And I think that the performance as well was the weakest of the cast. So, unfortunately, I'm not in the same camp for that one. As far as Caitlin goes, yeah, like, I understand what you mean. A lot of people say they love Caitlin, and I see where they're coming from, because she's a very loud personality. She's very sassy, and people, you know, are into that sort of thing. But she's absent for quite a lot of the game, and she's also in one of the scenes that I dislike the most in the Quarry, which is that pointless one where, you know, she's creeping around and Bobby's walking around the house. You know it's going to come to nothing. It just wastes time, and also, like, she's ridden with plot armor to a certain point, and it sort of feels unearned for me. So yeah, I'm perhaps more inclined to agree on that one. What about you, lad?
Yeah, so like with Ryan, I feel like, yeah, Justin Smith's performance is a little questionable. I think Ryan's my second least favourite character out of the 9 counsellors, after Nick, who just gets left at the door. And, like, you know, we don't need to speak about Nick. But yeah, I don't know what it is about Ryan. I feel like, you know, there's a good arc there. I'd probably be really drawn into his character, like the quiet, dark guy who then becomes the hero. I'm like, that sounds cool, you can do so much with that. But it just didn't quite land for me, and I feel like a lot of it was the decision making of his character arcs, dropping it with Dylan and then, you know, leaving with Laura, which I just thought was a completely dumb ship, and it was just weird that they even hinted that. So yeah, like, I think they kind of missed the mark with Ryan majorly at, you know, at some moments. And as for Caitlin, like Tatjana, I completely agree with that. Like, I get where you're coming from saying she didn't stand out that much. Caitlin looked like she was going to run away with the show up to, like, the campfire. You know, she has some witty lines with Jacob at the start, and then I quite like where she's like the mediator at the shooting range. I'm like, this is a really cool character. And in her defense, I did like her in Chapter 9, you know, the scrapyard scene, which might be my favorite scene of the game, potentially. But yeah, like, they just sort of drop her character arc, and I get she has the final battle, but I thought the battle was weak, and I really felt like they didn't do Caitlin justice. And I think she's one of the victims that gets majorly steamrolled by, Laura taking the limelight towards the end of the game, lad. Next, we have S, and you've picked out 3. Jack and I are going to pick the one that we think is the biggest hot take, and that is your middle one, your Quarry one. You're saying Nick and Emma's kiss was not that wrong at all. So yeah, I guess what you're saying is that Dylan said the rules prior, and everyone was technically single, if you were to label it, and Emma flirting with Jacob on the lake was to cheer him up. Now, I mean, I get there's a few things here. I'll talk about the lake. Yeah, she probably felt a little bad, had to run after him, and then I do think maybe there was good intention, but I don't know, saying shit like Nick knew what he was doing with his tongue. Even if your best friend is single but really likes a guy, you don't make out with them. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Emma's a bad person. I think that there's many things I love about her character, and I still really like her as a character. I just, and I get, she's 17, 18, mistakes happen, you're a kid, and I get she's a bit of a caricature of, teen drama. That's what they were going for. But, I don't know, in my opinion, S, I like you. You're a long-time fan of ours, but agree to disagree. I think it's completely wrong, and I think the kiss should not have happened.
Yeah, I've got to say I agree as well. It's one of them things where I look at Jacob and Emma, and I do feel like at heart they're good people, but maybe it's just their methods are in question for as to why they do something. And I do feel like obviously rules are rules and whatnot, but I feel like a level of common sense and just showing a bit of heart has to come in at certain points. Everyone was aware of the situation. You've got the scratch markings on the tree of Jacob and Emma. Even Caitlin was digging Jacob out earlier on about it, and it's one of them things where you just keep it light. You don't need to sort of be bringing about these situations where you're gonna raise emotions and stuff. So yeah, it was just one of them unnecessary things. I don't think it should have happened. I think it was a wrong thing. Okay, so next we have a comment from Aqualiba, who says the devil in me is a disappointing experience. Wow. I mean, obviously, if you know both our lists, I'm pretty sure the devil in me come out on top. But some of the things that Aqualiba goes through here. So one being that there's not enough traps. We also know that they're basically saying that there's too much exploration, and that they felt that Dumet should have been a more beatable opponent and such. I think, it's the thing is that there's stuff there that I do actually agree with, but I wouldn't therefore label it as a disappointing experience. Do I think they could have done more traps? Yes, I do. I feel like there was so many things in that game, i.e., the trap that is it Jamie and Mark come across, where you've got the buzzsaw in the middle and you've got 2 mannequins with they're chained to it and it's going to get pulled close to the buzzsaw. That could have been a genuine trap. There was acid baths in there, and even in the end you've got the thing here about Mark and his fear of heights. That wasn't necessarily explored, so there was definitely missed opportunities. I'm completely with you there. But otherwise, I mean, just going back to the first sentence, I wouldn't say it was a disappointing experience. I still say it was the best one, but maybe there was just missed opportunities here and there, and maybe a little bit of tinkering. What about you, lad?
Yeah, I get you. So, I'd say disappointing experience, very harsh. I disagree with that line per se, but a lot of your points are actually really credible. And what I will say to you, Aqualiba, is that as time has gone on, I put Devil in Me as my top game. And I think that was influenced heavily by the fact that it was longer and we had all these new cool features that the game so desperately needed, like running. The more time has gone on, the more the Devil in Me actually goes down, in my opinion, despite the fact that it's got my all-time favourite DPA character, Mr. Charlie Lonnet. There's a few things about it that, I felt Devil in Me could have done better. There's some linear bits in there. The plot armor stuff. And if you are talking about, the uncreative deaths and the fact that, it's quite exploration heavy, you're not wrong. And, these are some really credible points, and thank you very much for voicing them, because I would say that is indeed a very good hot take. I don't know comes in here saying that a lot of the death animations are the same. Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. Like, I look at Until Dawn and you've got like Emily and Ashley both having the identical animation where their eyes get gouged out. I think it's probably one that has got better over time, because you look at, say, The Devil in Me, where Erin has the cool death where she can get stabbed in the eye, and then you could have the glass wall trap, and I guess, you know, that does lend really well into, say, like, the fact there's different traps going on, while with, like, a Wendigo, yeah, like, they're only going to do sort of 2 various different deaths, you know, kills in a way. But yeah, you know, it's a very valid point that, yeah, like, some of the death animations are the same, but in Supermassive's defense, I think it's something they have got better at.
Okay, so next we've got a comment from Casey, who says that right, for all Supermassive Games titles after Medan, some relationships were fine, but having them in every game now ruins the chance for extra time and work to have something else for the game. Yeah, I've got to admit, I was actually surprised, because when you think back, there is literally relationships in every single game. Whether it's Alex and Julia Medan, Daniel Taylor, Little Hope, you've got the love triangle in House of Ashes, and then you've got another 2 relationships in The Devil in Me. I do feel like it's a bit overdone, and I do feel like that come Directive 8020, they should just have a crew of people. There's no romance involved, because, you know what I mean. Like, it can be a bit of overkill, and you know, you as a player, you've got to be expected to buy into these relationships, and if they don't work, it just comes off as a bit of a meh thing. So, I mean, as a hot take goes, I'm actually in agreement with it.
Yeah, and I'm so glad someone has said this. I love this hot take. Casey, I'm 100% with you. I think it's got better. I think in Man of Medan, Little Hope, it was the worst, because I would argue that Julia and Alex, and then Daniel and Taylor, their character was literally being a couple. There wasn't much beyond that. And I don't think it needs it. I think Supermassive Games sometimes has this little filthy habit of just needing a relationship in every game, like Jack said. And it just really waters down the character, you know. Give me something else. Don't have Daniel and Taylor as a couple. Maybe give one a phobia, and then make one, you know, have like, maybe, I don't know, a drug problem or something. Just give me something, you know, that, you know, you can do really cool untapped potential in the writing with. And I'm completely with Jack on this one. If Directive 8020 have a couple on the ship or a fucking love interest, I'm gonna lose it, I swear. Just give me 5 colleagues, and like we did the AI writing Directive 8020, and the 5 crew members it gave hinted nothing at a relationship, and I was so invested in these 5 characters. I don't need romance in these horror games to keep me invested. Please, just for once, Supermassive Games, leave romance at the door. I'm begging you. Next, we've got Shobin, who's done 5. Thank you very much for doing that. We have decided to pick, you know, one particular one. We've gone with your House of Ashes one, where you're saying the game needed more horror and it felt like a straight-up action game. You know what? I completely agree. Like, I look at the horror and I think, you know, the Man of Medan might be my favourite one for that. I really liked the ghost ship setting with the different jump scares you had going on, and going down the creaky, you know, like, damp corridors. I felt that was really special, and House of Ashes really lacked that, going through all the different tombs and sort of, you know, dark passageways. You know, and like the threat was a big monster, but it didn't really have that horror thing. And I do completely get you. You know, at times it felt like an action game. Maybe it's because we were playing as soldiers and we felt equipped to deal with a lot of it, but I don't know. I think it's a very valid comment, Shobin. Yeah, House of Ashes needed more horror.
I think what you said there, mate, is actually such a good point about, because we're soldiers and we've got guns, that we feel well equipped against these things. There's only one bit in House of Ashes, and no, I wouldn't necessarily call it horror, but it's that sort of, that sense that if you were there, it's sort of like, oh god, that would be bloody horrible. And it's that bit where the bats are starting to hatch on the big egg, and they're starting to like scuttle down the edges. That bit was really cool. As far as just the little noises and like the general action moments, I wasn't necessarily scared. I was more concerned about the players' lives. And I feel like the best horror games are the ones where you genuinely feel scared because of the sense of the unknown, not because you're scared of getting someone killed. Sort of as an example, like if you look at The Devil in Me, that moment where you're playing as Erin and you've got like the dark corridor and you've got the headphones on, for me, that's a very strong horror sequence. Now, I sort of, because of playing these games before, you know that nothing's necessarily going to happen because it doesn't really tend to in the walking sequences. But nonetheless, like, the horror beats were there, and I thought it was really effective. Whereas some of these other things where you're in a fight and, there's something that's about to swipe at you, I'm not scared then. So I do take your point. And yeah, sticking with the theme of House of Ashes, we've got a comment from Cybe Cybes, who basically says that House of Ashes didn't land at all. So there's quite a bit here. They basically say that the protagonists are unlikable, the plot twist was unearned. So let's dive into it, shall we? I mean, it's funny because I know a couple of you have said in the comments about what our hot takes are, and maybe that's something for another video. But what I'd say is this regarding House of Ashes is that I do... it might be a bit controversial, but I actually see where Cybes is coming from in extent in terms of the first statement. I do think that House of Ashes is a tad overrated. Like, when I look at people in the community say, oh, House of Ashes is better than the Quarry, or House of Ashes, it's the best game Supermassive ever done, I'm like, no. It's not. It's probably about the 4th or 5th best that they've ever done. As far as like the protagonist, I don't necessarily mind the protagonist. I think that the bonus characters were great as well. Not necessarily that they were likeable, but I thought that the writing and the camaraderie between them all was fantastic. The plot twist, is it a bit weird that, you go further in and you're suddenly on like this alien spaceship? Sure, but do you know what I mean? It's one of them things where you just gotta like wipe it off, I guess. But yeah, like for me, it's like the whole House of Ashes thing, and it really dawned on me when we did the curators video. But a lot of it's just walking through the caves, isn't it? You get the occasional showdown, but a lot of it's very character heavy, walking through caves, and it's only really towards the end that it starts to amp up a bit. And that's why I lean to the fact that it is a tad overrated. Not that I'm hating on it, it's still my second favourite game in the anthology, but just like other comments I've seen previous, it makes me think, I don't think it's that good, if you get what I mean. But yeah, mate, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I actually love this comment, everything about it, the detail they've gone in, the points they've raised. It's great, and you know what? It's so good that I actually do buy in, and I'm sold by a lot of this as well, actually, mate. I would talk about, the good things I like. I thought it was such a nice change from Man of Medan, Little Hope. Gave us like different set of characters, able-bodied soldiers. We had, a really cool setting that I really bought into. And yeah, like a really different monster, which I felt was cool. And yeah, like you say, the NPCs, brilliant. We had so many cool side characters. But yeah, your point is so good about how the plot twist was unearned, because there weren't many breadcrumbs leading to the fact it could have been aliens, and maybe it would have been nice if they gave us like a little kind of handout that we could have maybe guessed that ourselves. Just, it went from like being like, yeah, like fighting the terrorists to then falling in the caves, and then you get the vampire things. But yeah, like it just kind of came out of nowhere, like, oh yeah, by the way, it's aliens. And I do know what you mean, and it's like it was cool, but yeah, like maybe unearned. And you had a point about how you even wonder if that's what their original idea from the beginning was or not. It does feel potentially a little tacked on at the end. That Cybes, I think you've actually got a really terrific point, so thank you very much for throwing that comment in.
Absolutely, I'm literally looking at it now as well, and they've said that the prologue is one of the best. I mean, fair enough. I mean, I know for me, I actually didn't really rate it, and that's partly why I guess I'm saying that it's overrated. But yeah, like some really good comments here, so thanks a lot, Cybes.
And we're ending it on this comment by Luke BBTT, my brother, who says, I like trees. How do you feel about that, Jack?
Shock horror. The thing is, I mean, obviously this has become like a channel joke now, but I genuinely think, I mean, the thing is, like, sure, real life trees are great, right? But in like these games, I do feel like that there is actually a bit of a heaviness when it comes to trees as like a horror setting, and I'm like, I do wish that it would get mixed up a little bit. So I'm hoping in season 2 and maybe, the next Supermassive blockbuster that there's a less of a reliance on woods and forests as a place for a good horror setting. Maybe that's just me.
Nah, for sure. Because the DPA games steer away from it, right? Like, but yeah, it's the blockbusters, isn't it? So like Until Dawn and the Quarry, a lot of it is going through forests and and it's funny because when I pitched a game, I set it in a jungle, partly to piss you off, but also because I thought it's a generally good idea. But nah, I do know what you're saying, mate. So yeah, it would be cool if like the next blockbuster game, put it in a snowy environment or something like you pitched, lad. That would go down a treat in my eyes.
Yeah, I even think about even Little Hope as well. I mean, I know you can't really go and rummaging in around the trees, but Little Hope has trees as well. Like, I'm gonna die on a hill with this argument.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Sweet.
Yeah.
But guys, thank you very much for pitching in these unpopular opinions and hot takes. A lot of them were really controversial, and that's exactly what I wanted. I've had a lot of fun making this video, so in the future, I'll do some more for like Telltale, like maybe some Don't Nod games, whatever it comes up with. So thank you very much for pitching these in, guys. And yeah, goodbye from me.
And we'll see you in the next video.